to DisruptEDtv, where every little idea could make a big difference potentially in your classroom or in your school.
Right.
And our guest today is Kimberly Harrington, who is the Commissioner of the New Jersey Department of Education. And it's such a pleasure having you on the program, Kimberly.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here to celebrate students and educators.
Well, and you know, that actually is a great way into the program. Celebrating students and educators. It starts with the concept that you use called student voice.
Absolutely.
Talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, in education, adults do a lot of talking about what needs to change and what students need, but they've left out one really critical voice in that conversation, the student voice. So students, regardless of age, kindergarten through 12th and beyond, have really strong feelings about how they like to learn, what they like to learn, how they learn best, and they're missing from this conversation. And it's really critical that they be at the forefront of the conversation. I really believe it's a game changer when we talk about education reform and what's really gonna make a difference. The game changer is gonna be when we put students at that forefront of the conversation, both literally and figuratively. So we allow them a space to talk. And when they're not present, we're always referencing them to make sure that our conversations are about what's best for children and not the adults. Because the adults serve the children, but it has to be first and foremost about children.
That gets me to an area that interests me. It's just organizational area. New Jersey Department of Education has a big scope.
Sure.
All the teachers, all the classrooms. But we're really talking here about individual student voices, actually making the difference in the classroom with the learner. Isn't
Absolutely,
that right?
absolutely. Because when students are believed in, they're empowered. And when they're empowered, they find their voice and then they use that voice in ways that are really just phenomenal in our world.
No, that is. Now, where does this all come from in your background?
Well, in my background, so I was a teacher. Well, I was a student first.
Okay.
And so,
We all were.
and much of what we believe about education or about our world comes from sort of some of our own experiences in the classroom as a student. So that's where it started for me. And then when I became a teacher, I taught every grade K to 8. And when I was teaching, I was always trying to think about what was it that I loved as a student and what was it that I felt like I needed more of or that was missing, and tried to bring that to my children and really engage them in creative, innovative ways. There were times where I removed all the desks from the classroom and replaced them with art easels and taught everything through art. Just trying to blend the content so that students could really understand it not in separate buckets, but as the interconnected. Students go through the day gathering information and skills as learners, and then sometimes that's not connected as a whole. So the learning doesn't seem to make sense to them because it's not in a experience that helps them to own that forever. And then from being a teacher, I moved on to become an administrator, a director of curriculum and instruction, really digging into the meat and bones around teaching and learning, and how do we bring innovative practices, and how do we really hear and see what students need, and really tailor what we're doing to meet the needs of each and every child in our classroom. I always used to say to my teachers, we never know who it is that sits in the seats who we serve. We don't know who they're going to be one day, and teaching is the most important occupation. I know I'm biased, but I truly believe that it's every other occupation comes from being fostered
Everything
and
about our
through a
society
teacher.
comes from those experiences that children have when they're
absolutely.
young.
So that was my next move, and working with teachers then really to help them elevate their practice, but to hone in on the individual students each year that sat in their classroom, because that changes each year. So you can't do the same thing year in and year out, because the children you're serving change and their needs change and their interests change. And then I went to work at the Department of Education. I was the director of academic standards. It was tricky leaving the classroom, leaving students and teachers. For me, that's my oxygen, getting to be around educators and learners as we reach out to our children and help them to be whatever it is they want to be. But really then getting to broaden my scope and to see education on a whole nother level, working for the state and working in schools and districts, and then moved from there to be the chief academic officer at the Department of Education, and then recently becoming the Commissioner of Education, and really making it my mission. When I was asked to take the job, for me, the non-negotiable was that I get to be out in schools celebrating teachers and listening to students, and I've really made that my mission.
The important thing you said about once you get the student involved, they'll take ownership of the educational experience.
Absolutely,
Yeah, that's
absolutely. Because when students copy down words and definitions from the board, or when they are walked through a science experiment step by step and they're sort of led through it,
Right.
just like parenting, they only own that learning in the moment. But when a child truly gets to experience the learning and sees content blend, they see math and science come together through music, through composition, or they see language arts and writing and reading and looking at not just history as our past, but what's happening in our future. Those integrated blending experiential learning experiences for children really help them own the learning for a lifetime. So
Right.
when they go back to think, oh, I remember learning about that, it's really deep and it's in them intrinsically, rather than something that they're trying to think back to. Where was I in the notebook? Where was that on the blackboard? I memorized it for a test and it's gone. But getting, I call it content in context.
Great.
And so when we bring that to life, it really takes on a whole new
It takes
level.
on a life of its
whole
own.
new level.
And that's,
Yep.
so how do you listen? The student voice comes from somewhere. How do you listen to the student?
Well, I really believe that it's coupled with listening to students and helping them to learn to find their voice and to hone that voice.
Okay.
When we think of the teenager, we often think of students having a large voice, but not always tailoring that and maybe not being heard because of
Right.
the way that they deliver a message. So I think listening to the student voice, first and foremost, means that we have to stop talking. We have to invite them to the conversation, and we have to include them in the conversation and really be genuinely interested in what they have to say and not making sort of predetermined or prejudged expectations about how that conversation is going to go, because sometimes they may tell us things that are hard to digest. But being open to having that conversation is, I think, how we do the listening part, inviting them to the conversation. We have a state board of education at the Department of Education, and one of my members of my State Board of Education is a student. And so really giving them that space and that time, again, to have a voice, to be part of decisions that are being made.
Right.
I remember in my own home with my parents, at the dinner table, having a conversation about something and being asked what I thought, but somebody genuinely interested in what that response was and allowing it to be part of our family decision making. And I think that's part of listening to children, is hearing their voice, but also helping them to feel truly heard and validated, and not that there's an expected response. And then they come to the conversation more freely. The second part of that, though, to say, I believe that there's 3 voices every child needs, and I think our teachers really do an amazing job fostering that.
That's great. Well, we need to take a break, but we want to come back and talk more about that, especially about teachers fostering that. We'll be back after this break with Kimberly Harrington, Commissioner, New Jersey Department of Education, right here on DisruptEDtv. See you in a minute.
I went to college right after high school, but it didn't work out. After a few years in the workforce and the birth of my son, I decided to give college another try. At Brookdale, something clicked. I met amazing professors and found a major I was passionate about. I made the dean's list, landed a great internship, and now I'm pursuing my bachelor's degree. Thanks to Brookdale, I have what it takes to see my dreams through. I'm Tara Boyce, and I came to Brookdale to give college another try. I never imagined I would find my passion.
Welcome back to DisruptEDtv. My name is Al Cini,
I'm Joe Osamendi.
and our guest today is Kimberly Harrington, who is the Commissioner of the New Jersey Department of Education. Kimberly, it's such a pleasure having you on the program.
Thanks so much for having me here.
Before the break and then during the break, we talked a little bit about how you parse out that voice that we hear from students, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I really have come to believe that there are 3 really critical voices that every child should have. So our students nowadays, our children, are more connected than we ever were. So we, back in the day before technology, we were reliant on a newspaper or a TV, which our parents could turn off or put aside, and we never saw it.
Right.
But our children have technology at their fingertips. And so they're constantly connected, and they see the news instantly. They're hearing and learning about what's happening in their school, their town, their state, their country, and their world. So for me, when I've started to think about that over the last couple of years, I've really tried to think, how do we empower children to find that voice and to tap in and to grow and foster that? Just like the skill of writing or learning to play an instrument or a sport, it's something that really has to be taught. So for me, I've distilled it to, I believe there are 3 critical voices. The first voice I believe every child needs to have is the voice of speech. And so that's something that our teachers really do a tremendous job of. They work every day with our students, having them read and write and integrate those skills. But a big focus over the last few years has really been a shift to digging into informational texts, nonfiction, and then helping students to think, how do they write? And so when you write to speak, first you decide on something that's important to you that you want to take a stand on or you want to speak in behalf of. And then you also, when you write, you need to support it with evidence. So when you're writing fantasy or fictional writing, it just comes out of your imagination and your brain. And you put those thoughts down on paper, and word choice and things are important. But the voice of speech, that writing really needs evidence behind it. It needs research base. I always say to my own personal children, put your posse behind you. You need to have others who speak with expertise around something you're passionate about. And I think helping our children to realize that their voice has more power when they speak, when they join it with voices of others on a similar topic. So that's the first one.
I just wanted to jump in.
Yeah.
Speaking is really the visible version of thinking.
Right.
It's what you
Right.
That's how you know somebody's thinking.
Right.
So that the ability to articulate an argument, to present facts, to support what you're saying, that's a key skill for a child to learn.
And it's a key skill, whether it's doing public speaking or operating as a citizen,
Sure.
Right.
but it's also a really important skill in the workplace.
Right.
When we interact with others all day long and we need to present ideas and to problem solve, being able to articulate your thoughts and ideas is really important.
It's a
That's
life
great.
skill.
Exactly.
It's a very important
exactly.
life skill.
So the second voice for me is the voice of creativity. So when I think about the components of what bring power to voice, we can have words and we can speak, but if we don't have a passion and an enthusiasm behind it, it doesn't have as much power because it makes it hard for others to believe that it's really happening and that it's genuine, that there's a real power to the message. So for me, that voice of creativity comes in helping children to really discover what it is they're passionate about, where their strengths lie and where there's opportunities for growth. And so that might be an athlete, it might be in sports, it could be robotics, an engineering program, it could be students are interested in drawing or music or dance. Whatever that creative interest area is, there's a voice that lies in that, and it creates a spark and a passion inside someone. And so I believe that when children find that voice and then they couple that with that voice of speech, there brings an authenticity, there brings a true passion behind the words. And then lastly, for me, I think the most critical voice is the voice of the heart. So I'm always thinking about how do we help children learn to take care of and to give back to others. When you're a child, you go through those stages where you're very self-centered, internally focused, and how do we recognize there's a big world around us, whether it's just in our own neighborhood or out into the larger world, and how can they be part of making a difference? And so for me, that's the voice of the heart, and it's learning to find those areas, to find others who maybe can't find their voice at the moment or don't have a voice, and you learn how to speak on behalf of them or to be an advocate. And so for me, when you combine words with passion and then your heart, where it's really caring and giving to others, there's unbelievable power when you put those 3 voices together. And again, that's making radical changes in our state, our country, and our world, but it's also making major contributions in your career, is being able to have those pieces fit together and really taking a stand and helping to move work forward and think innovatively.
That's important. I mean, we're seeing more of an emphasis on collaborative behavior in the classroom, where kids really need to learn how to work with each other and not compete against each other. Because I really think that's like a cornerstone of solving bullying problems and conflicts.
Absolutely, and when we think about when I work with business and industry, and I'm asking them about what are some of those gaps they see in the skill sets or the open opportunities that they have, positions to be filled, one of the things that comes up over and over again are something that when we were growing up we called the soft skills, but really are those critical skills of having, learning to be collaborative, to listen to others as well as to be able to be a participant, to be able to persevere when it gets tough and stick through and solve a problem. And so I think that's where, again, those voices come together to really help students navigate the work world, which is what we're obviously trying to ready them for, is whatever it is that they might want to be.
No, that's important. And so your role then at the Department of Education, the DOE's role relative to teachers, is essentially to coach them in this practice. Is that it?
Absolutely. And so what are the ways that we are able then to help teachers be able to hear the student voice and to foster that voice? And it comes in lots of different ways. I think, it's not just listening directly to a child speak. That's one way to literally hear their voice. We can hear their voice in writing. We hear the silent voice, the things that aren't said, the body language, the behaviors of a child. And so I think for our educators out there, it's really important that you hone those skills. So maybe you're really good at looking what's happening in their words and looking beyond those words and hearing their voice. But maybe you haven't really been tapping into paying attention to the body language. Maybe you've got a really disruptive child, for example, in your classroom who's got you at your wit's end. And you've honed in that no matter what you do, that child is going to be disruptive. How do you hear the voice that's coming through in that behavior that may be saying, I'm disengaged, something's going on at home? How do we tap into that so that we make sure each and every child is learning?
That is so important. I mean, that's the subject of equity versus equality, which is a whole other topic that we'll talk about. I mean, it's a great subject. And we need to take a break, but we'll be back after this break on DisruptEDtv with a terrific guest, Kimberly Harrington, Commissioner, New Jersey Department of Education. We'll be right back. Terrific. Welcome back to DisruptEDtv. My name is Al Cini.
I'm still Joe Osamendi.
And but our guest today is Kimberly Harrington. She is the Commissioner of the New Jersey Department of Education.
Welcome.
Thanks so much
absolutely.
for having
What a
me.
great guest. We're so lucky to have
Really
you.
fun time here.
And just before the break, we were talking about listening to those individual voices and how maybe you've got an unruly child in your classroom and you have a tendency to just sort of label them as unruly and maybe give up on them. But if you keep listening, you'll hear that voice come through and you'll get to the root cause of that problem. Is that right?
Absolutely. And when we break through the root cause of the problem, then we break through the barriers in the brain that are literally inhibitors to learning. And we allow a child then an open door and a place to come to learning that they may have not been able to approach previously.
And those turnaround stories are always the most powerful stories you can hear. I mean, Joe, our experience on this program is that those turnaround stories where you take one child who might have been kind of left to the side,
That's right.
and include them in things. And that moment when that happens is always a memorable experience for a teacher.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So part of what the Department of Education does then is recognize when this happens in the classroom, in a school or district.
That's right.
And make sure that everybody else is made aware of it,
That's
celebrating those experiences.
Yeah, we really have worked hard at the department to begin to change the way we sort of go about business, so to speak. So as being seen for so long as a compliance agency, really making that shift to be supportive. You talked about collaboration before. It's when we are collaborative that we really make a difference. When we work together, we all bring different perspectives and different aspects, whether you're a parent hearing that voice from the parent angle of a child, or whether you're the teacher, or you're the school board member, or you're the administrator, or you're the state government official. But when we all work together, they're all of our children, then we're really impactful. So at the department, we've really made it our point to figure out how do we do a better job celebrating celebrating educators. I think often educators feel like all anyone notices are the negativities, or what are the things we can do to change. But change meaning like a focus of something's not occurring properly. And so for me at the department, it's been really critical that we find ways to find the great things that are happening to serve children, and then how do we replicate those and help others find those areas.
That's key.
It really is key. And so two really big components we've focused on. One has been stakeholder engagement. So, when you go to a child's parent-teacher conference and the parent says, here's the problem, what do you think we should do about it? But they've really already come to a solution and you feel like you're just being, sort of patronized a little bit. And I think people have felt that way about the work of the department sometimes, where they're drawn into a conversation where it's really too late to be impactful. So one of the things we've really sought to do is to reach out to all stakeholders, whether it's all those groups I just named, our advocacy groups, all those education organizations. How do we work together, and how do we bring those people in? They're the practitioners in the field. They're closest to the children. They're hearing those voices on the ground level. We're removed from that at the State Department. So when we engage stakeholders early and throughout a process, they're really informing the work. They're able to share the voices and the experiences they're having, which allow us to be flexible and to move and ebb and flow with the initiatives that we have. And speaking of initiatives, so one of the things I think that happens for educators is they have initiatives that come out to the field and they feel like it's another thing they have to do, and how are they going to get it done? And when I talk to educators, and really anybody in any profession, the two gifts that anybody can give is time and money.
Right.
And so for me, I really wanted to think about what's a way that we can celebrate educators, but also helps maybe give back some time and some dollars to our educators and to our schools and districts. And so I recently created an initiative called the Lighthouse Districts. And so this isn't something where you check off a box, you fill out a long application, you have to spend a lot of time away from the focus on teaching and learning to put together an application. We find you. And so what we're looking for at the department is we're looking for those educators similar to you all on DisruptEDtv, where you're looking for people who are sort of shaking it up, who are making things happen. We're looking for people who are growing their children. We know that some of our learners are, when we just look at, we're going to get them to this benchmark, we don't see the tremendous growth that's happening and that our educators are fostering out in the field. So the Lighthouse Districts really allows us to find those schools and districts who are really serving and growing across a diverse group of learners. And then how can we take those practices and replicate them out to the field?
That's important. And the other important element too is it's not a competitive program. It's not like
Oh, absolutely not.
school districts that don't get the Lighthouse recognition have not failed. It's
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's our attempt to really find those practices that are easier to implement and replicate, that don't cost a lot of money or need a lot of resources. And then how do we help connect districts to find each other
that's so
and really maximize, instead of reinventing the wheel, how do we help people learn from one another and partner around those efforts when, we're struggling to grow our children?
And you always accentuate the positive, which gives them the energy.
Absolutely.
That's where all the energy comes from. That's success.
Absolutely. Well, just like we're asking our educators to believe in their children, because it's truly when a child feels believed in that they come to the learning in a totally different way. We also need to be doing that for our educators. We need them to know that we believe in them. They're doing an incredibly hard job every day on behalf of their children. And so what are the things that we can do to make their life a little easier? To say, hey, great job, but also, you know what? I know you're trying to do this in your district. We just met this other district. They're doing this. And then how do we bring together the resources so that a school might find one of these Lighthouse Districts on our website and then be able to go visit them, take a little field trip for educators to see from other educators and to talk to them about the practice, to pull down, like maybe it was they had a strategic plan for how they were going to make this happen. Who did they talk to on what timeline? What were the lessons learned? What are those things that will make the job of an educator easier and allow them to stay focused on the children in their schools?
That's so important. Where did the idea come from? Where did this start?
So the idea came from, we actually had a superintendent who was talking about the importance of educators being lighthouses
okay.
for one another, and also shining the light on each and every child, which is a really courageous conversation. You know, when it's easy for us to look and say we're doing great, or the majority of our students are learning and growing,
Right.
but if we really have that hard conversation to say, okay, we're doing great for the majority of our students, but we've still got these third grade female Latino students who
Right.
are struggling with reading, or we have this group of economically disadvantaged students who, are we really providing them every opportunity we can? And so that's where when I heard her say that, I thought this is an amazing initiative. And,
Right.
and my deputy commissioner, who I think has been on the show before, Pete Schulman,
Right. Mhm.
really
Show.
helped to foster this initiative and to say, like, how can we help shine the light on educators and celebrate them, but also recognize those educators who are courageously shining the light on each and every child to really break down the barriers that still exist, unfortunately, to learning for
And
many
you're
of our
it's
gonna
children.
incremental.
You're going to create a platform for continuous improvement, basically, in
Well, that's
education.
really it. That's what it is.
Right, exactly. And so just like that stakeholder engagement, we've had this inaugural group of Lighthouse Districts, and we've invited them into the conversation. So instead of saying, here's our initiative, this is what we're doing, we took a leap of faith and we said, you know what, we're not going to let good be the enemy of perfect.
Right.
Or perfect be the enemy of good, or however that expression goes.
right,
And what
right.
we're going to do is we're going to pick an inaugural group, we're going to invite them to partner with
Right.
us and to say, you know what, these are the things that would be helpful to us, or these are the things that we think you should look for. Because sometimes when you have these great ideas and what could be a celebration, if you put too many have-tos and too many check marks around it, you
Right.
take away from the whole
You've
organic
taken the
nature,
magic
the
out of
beauty
the
of it.
experience. That's the
Exactly,
beauty of it,
exactly.
is in that. So-
Exactly, and then it becomes competitive, and so
And you don't want that.
no,
That's
so we're
exactly what you
inviting
don't
these
want.
educators from this inaugural group in, and they're working alongside us to guide us to be
Sure.
our light
Right.
on how we can do a better job serving
That's-
educators at the department.
We need to take a break. When we
Okay.
come back, I'm going to talk about the mechanics of all that.
Oh, sure.
Because the devil is always in the details.
Of course,
So
absolutely.
someone want to learn some more about how the Lighthouse program works
Sure.
from Kimberly Harrington, Commissioner, New Jersey Department of Education, after this break on DisruptEDtv.
We'll be right back with Kimberly. Stick around.
Okay.
Great. This is terrific. It's a real pleasure for us. Welcome back to DisruptEDtv. My name is Al Cini.
Yes, I'm Joe Osamendi.
And it is our pleasure to be talking today with Kimberly Harrington, who is the Commissioner of New Jersey Department of Education.
Thanks for having
And,
me.
it's such a pleasure.
It's a great
And
time.
we're on the same page. Our job at DisruptEDtv is to take ideas from the classroom and shine a light on them so that other teachers could learn from them.
Right.
And that really is the essence of the Lighthouse District program, isn't
Absolutely.
it?
Absolutely, because we're looking to find those shining moments, those things that others are doing that somebody else could easily take and replicate, and it could make a difference for them and save them a lot of time and energy. We know that our educators put in countless hours that go unnoticed in their evenings, on their weekends, over their vacations, their summers,
Sure.
to make a difference. So how do we help find those great things and let others see them?
And to raise the probability that those little miracles will happen more often.
Absolutely.
And more frequently, in more different schools. And that's why it's
Absolutely.
so how do you find the schools that you recognize in the Lighthouse program?
So we are the Department of Education, and so we have various initiatives that have gone on, and often I feel like happen in buckets. Just like our children learn content, in an English class or a mathematics class or a science classroom, I think often our educators feel like they have to implement, a new state assessment system, teacher evaluation, standards, whatever, and check all those boxes off. And so really looking for people who've said, you know what, we're not going to do it this way. We're going to take all these things and put them together and figure out how are we creating a scrapbook of our child instead of just a photograph on
Right.
each one of those things. And so from the department's standpoint, what we've done, because we have so many schools in our state and districts, is that we've been able to look out and across, we look at the state assessment results, we look at the data that comes in on chronic absenteeism, on other practices that folks are doing to improve their students. We look at people who are thinking creatively about how they can still do those initiatives that are mandated, but really making sure that they are focused on what's happening for their particular group of children. So those are the sort of the look-fors, but when we have gone for those look-fors, what we've sort of discovered are there are a recipe, I'd say. There's some commonalities that we see across these districts, this inaugural group.
Okay, great. And so you go out then to that school or school district. You tell them that you've identified them, and then you create their story, and that's what you communicate out to everybody else.
Correct. And for me, going out to the district is twofold. Just like any of my school visits, it's to celebrate them, the outstanding work, the time and the energy that the educators have put into things, and also to hear from the students. You know, what's happening? You know, how do they feel as a learner? What's making a difference for them? Because that really helps to shine a light, again, on those practices, but also those individual students.
Give those students an opportunity to voice their opinion and feel important.
Absolutely. And really, you know, it's interesting because I always say children are wonderful observers, but terrible interpreters. So they feel everything that's happening to them, and then they create their own story about why it happened, and it often comes down to them. They think they did something that caused it, positively or negatively, etc. And so having a chance to come out and talk with students and really finding that they're noticing, they're feeling a difference. Things are different around here. You know, we're doing more projects that are hands-on. We're inviting in, you know, people from business and industry to come into our classrooms and partner with us. Like our teachers, you know, have more energy. They're excited, you know, and to me, having been an educator for so long, it's really important because we don't acknowledge our teachers enough. And when you're feeling like just defeated and that you're working tirelessly, and sometimes it could be years or never that you know the many lives you've touched, when we can get out there and help celebrate that, hopefully it gives them new energy and a new validation for the incredible work that they do every day.
Sure. And you were saying too during the break that this isn't an annual program. This is a constantly ongoing program.
That's right. We're trying really hard not to make this be too scripted or too prescriptive, because I think that often takes the beauty out of a program. So we have the inaugural group working with us to decide, what does this look like? Is there a timeline, or is it when we just have a next cohort ready? Will it be twice a year? I would definitely want to see it be more than once a year. I think that's too long, and there's so much good to celebrate. And it really makes a difference when you get to go out to a district. I usually bring a large entourage of people with me to see and celebrate and hear, so that, again, those conversations continue across diverse populations of adults who are advocating for education.
That's key. And you mentioned too during the break that you're getting some feedback now from some of the teachers who are being recognized in the program.
We are. It's just amazing. In fact, on one of my visits, it actually made me tear up because one of the teachers said to me, I was thanking her for her service and clearly the difference she was making for her children, and she choked up and she said, I have been teaching for 35 years. Never once has the state come out to the school, let alone anyone come out and specifically thank us as teachers for what we're doing. And you know, that, just like for children, that is a game changer. When somebody says thank you for what you do is just so important.
Well, saying thank you for what you do to somebody who's doing it means they're going to do it more often. And
That's
the more
right.
often they do it, the better off everybody is, especially the learners, the
That's
students.
right.
So that's great. And this is all levels of education we're talking about here, K through 12.
K through 12, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
And it's performance not only with respect to academic excellence, but also with respect to community involvement.
Yeah, well, we're looking for the whole child is a conversation that's so critical, because I think people feel that oftentimes there's such a focus on academic learning that we forget there are other pieces that come into that. So for us, obviously, it comes down to our children learning and are they growing, but that happens in lots of different areas, because we have, if a student is chronically absent, they're not in school, they're not learning, and there may be things going on at home that are unaddressed. What's a role that a school or district can play working with the community? It may be that I hear from children over and over again about their high stress levels. And, they say sometimes they put that on themselves. They feel it somewhat in school. That seems to be the least place they feel it. Home is their greatest stress impact, whether it's parents with high expectations or the opposite, parents who are maybe not involved or there's trauma happening. So we're looking for those districts that are being creative to think about what are the ways that we can meet the needs and work with our community of educators as well as the parent and larger community of businesses, of health and wellness. How do we bring all those pieces together to make sure that our children are learning? Because all those aspects weigh into how a child can come to learning.
Right, you can foster a creativity and an experience of learning. It's great.
No, that is
Absolutely.
certainly what
But
you're
if a
looking for.
child has, either isn't coming to school or has something that's cluttering their mind, they can't even, they don't experience that learning.
They don't.
Right.
And
Okay.
so this to me is another way of, when we look at those districts, we're certainly looking for improvement, academic improvement in children, but we're looking for what are the ways, that the whole child is growing, that they're
Right.
addressing not just what's happening in the classroom, but those other areas that affect learning.
That's great. We need to take a break,
Okay.
but we have more to talk about.
All right.
With Kimberly Harrington, Commissioner, New Jersey Department of Education. Right back after this break on DisruptEDtv.
Stay around.
Thank you. Welcome back to DisruptEDtv, actually a special edition, extended version of DisruptEDtv. My name is Al Cini.
I'm Joe Asamendi.
But our guest is Kimberly Harrington. She's the Commissioner of the New Jersey Department of Education. A lot of information to share with us. A real pleasure having you on the program, Kimberly. Thanks for
It's
joining
truly
us.
my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kimberly.
During the break, and as we were finishing up the last segment, I'm thinking to myself that we have probably the most multi-generational workforce among teachers today than maybe at any other time in history. So it's not just about helping teachers who are new to teaching use the spark that comes with that. It's also about helping maybe older teachers, more senior teachers to rediscover that spark. Isn't that right?
Absolutely. And I think, age has been seen as a barrier, not just in education, but across. We always say, oh, well, that couple has this age difference or those friends aren't the same age.
Sure.
And really age has, I think, really nothing to do with it. And I think there's benefits to all ages coming together. And, what I'm really seeing in that multi-generational teaching workforce is really tremendous opportunity. You have, new teachers who come in and they have the joy of teaching. It's brand new. They come full of ideas. They're excited to enter the classroom, but maybe they have some gaps because it's all brand new and there's a lot of learning. And when you get into your first classroom and that door closes on the first day and you're there with your children, that's really daunting. And so what are those connects? And then you look at maybe a more senior teacher who has that experience, the expertise they've learned over the years, and maybe they're feeling like they could use something new to really keep life exciting. And so I think, how do we break down those barriers? I think really is what's happening in our classrooms with our students is figuring out that collaboration piece. We see it in the workforce as a whole. And really, I think for me, one of the critical things is always recognizing what your blind spots are. Where are your own strengths and weaknesses, and being self-reflective. So I would encourage any teachers who are watching this program, if you haven't already started a journal, it's not something you do regularly, I would encourage you to start a journal and to keep it, to make it twofold, so that maybe one side of it is thinking about and being reflective with yourself about what are areas that you feel like you do really, really well, and where are some areas that maybe you feel like are harder for you or that you'd love to learn. It's something new. The other thing I would encourage teachers to do in their journals, because I find for myself it's something to go back to time and time again, is keeping a gratitude list. Things that you're grateful for. It just gives you that energy boost. And so back to that multi-generational learning, I think staff, I think when you are self-aware and you can know what your strengths are and weaknesses are, then you figure out how do you fit together, how do you work together. And I think to our leaders, our principals, our superintendents who may be watching, when you think about how you form your grade, the groupings of teachers in a particular grade level or grade band, really being mindful. Are you mindful of there's surveys you can give on personalities and interests? Do you know your staff? Do you know the people who are serving your children in terms of thinking about, I've got this dynamic teacher with a real strength in literacy. You know, and I've got this new teacher who's coming in with all these great ideas around technology, and I have this senior teacher who's really motherly and helps to lead the flock, and then I have, you know, and are you thinking about what rounds out a team? Are you
that's
thinking
important.
about the teams?
Right.
And I think for teachers, you know, to be open and to realize that if you say to yourself, this is an area I think I could use to grow in, or this is something that I'm really interested in and I don't know much about it, it's okay
No,
to
that
say
is
that.
okay.
It
Yeah,
really
that's-
is okay. And, you know, say it to your colleagues or ask somebody who you are interested in. And I think that just naturally breaks down those barriers of
Well,
how we
that's-
work with one another.
And the Lighthouse program is about celebrating those connections too, between
Absolutely.
senior teachers and junior teachers.
Absolutely.
Who can mentor each other, by the way. That's another thing.
That's
It's not
right.
always the senior partner in that relationship who's the mentor. Sometimes the mentor is the younger teacher.
Yeah, I was recently in a school where there was a non-tenured teacher, so a very new teacher, only in teaching a couple of years, who was serving in the classroom, but also as a technology coach to the school. And people, you know, coming to that, I think choice is really important when you're looking to break down barriers. I think when we try to force things to happen,
Right.
that's when our self-defense mechanisms get enacted and our walls go up.
Sure.
But when you allow teachers choice to say, you know, I'd really like to learn this, or I'd like to know more about that, or, you know, I think this is something I could share at a teacher faculty meeting. I could give a little lesson on how to do this. When there's choice and people come to it on their own, again, they're just like
You
a
get more
child. There's
power, you
greater
get
value
the-
in
you
that.
get that
There's
kind
that
of-
owned learning.
Yeah, well, that's
And the
it.
other thing that's important, when you foster creativity and imagination, you encourage collaboration.
That's right.
You do.
That's
Absolutely.
right.
Comes
And
from-
choice too, because it keeps that open. It doesn't, you know, the
Right.
barriers.
Exactly,
Yeah.
it breaks them down.
Right.
This actually gets me into a subject that kind of fascinates me. I know
Sure.
the New Jersey Department of Education, as we mentioned earlier in the program, has a huge scope to deal with of a lot of teachers and a lot of students and a lot of classrooms and buildings. And somehow, though, it sounds to me like in the Lighthouse program, you found a way to bring this down and make it more personal and more selective and more individual. Is that right?
Yeah, and I just think that's the key. I think that's, you know, as the Department of Education has looked over the last few years to really rebrand itself and to be a better partner, to find out how we can serve better, but also to leverage the incredible expertise of the staff at the department. You know, when we look at how do we come to those conversations together, where are the opportunities to have an advisory group of teachers come and share with us around what they're doing and how we could better support that with our policies, or where a group of administrators might come and talk to us about how this is problematic, where the barriers are for implementation.
Yeah.
A curriculum coordinator who's been working with a group of teachers to revamp curriculum to say, you know, this is really hard work, but here's a tool that you put out that was really helpful to us, but if you just tweaked it this way, it would be even more powerful. So I think really, you know, ourselves included, breaking down those barriers, being able and willing to listen and to invite in and to have those hard conversations. Sometimes, you know, we don't hear great things. Somebody might
Right.
have a criticism of something we're doing, but how do you take a look at that and reflect on it to really figure out how you go about serving? We are here to serve. We serve over 1 million children in New Jersey. We know as educators we serve together across not only the state but the country. We need to be interconnected, and when you serve and you look at it from that angle that you are here to serve children, we do it together. We do it much more powerfully.
Well, that's terrific. And you know, what fascinates me about this is you're really turning the org chart of education upside down.
Right.
That's right.
The top of the org chart is the learner, the student. Underneath that is the teacher. Your job at the Department of Education is to give that teacher the insight and information and tools that he or she needs
That's
in
right.
order to make the best possible experience for that learner at whatever level that might be.
Yeah, and we've recently, we try to be responsive because I think people sometimes don't know they've been heard if there's
Right.
not
And
an action. You have to have action to go with your words.
Sure,
And
sure.
so, you know, for an example, we redid our website, which, you know, in the state level, our websites aren't fancy. They're
Right.
not, you know, they're not full of bells and whistles, but we've heard from educators the kinds of things that would be helpful, and redid our website. And recently we were sort of doing a walkthrough with a group of educators, and somebody said, oh, you know what would be great is if you could do this. And it was an easy tweak, and we could make that happen. And then those tools get into the hands quicker, but also people feel like they are listening to me. And that is truly my goal, is to celebrate educators, to thank them for what they do, and to let them know I am listening and I do hear you. And thank you for making a difference.
That is terrific. And
Wonderful.
Kimberly, we're coming up on that part of our program where you get to tell everybody how to reach you.
All right.
And I'm thinking there could be teachers out there who want to talk to you. There could
Sure.
be stakeholders in the education process who would like to talk to you. There could be commissioners at departments of education in other states who want to learn more about the Lighthouse program. So maybe you could just tell them all how to get a hold of you.
Sure. So the best way to reach me is kimberly.harrington@doe.state.nj.us, and that's KIMBERLEY.Harrington, HARRINGTON, at doe.state.nj.us, or you can find me on Twitter. I'm hiding there. I'm on there as @agratitudegirl. I use my Twitter handle just to thank educators for the outstanding work that they do.
Well, that's terrific. And Kimberly, thank you so much for
Thank
appearing
you.
on
It's
our program.
really my
Pleasure.
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 Thank
to
you
have
for
Kimberly.
having me.
Sure.
And thank all of you for joining us today on DisruptEDtv. Our guest, Kimberly Harrington, had lots of great ideas, and hopefully you'll be able to use some of those to make a difference in your school or in your school district. And we hope you'll join us again for a future episode of DisruptEDtv.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Terrific.
Kimberly.
Really good.